In the last few days, the Middle East has reached a dangerous turning point. The long-standing tension between the United States, Israel, and Iran has shifted from threats to direct military action. Many are now asking the same question: are we on the verge of a much larger war? Everything moved incredibly fast, from a high-stakes speech by Donald Trump to surgical strikes inside Iran, and then a direct retaliation. Today, we're breaking down exactly what happened, why it happened, and what it means for the rest of the world. For years, tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran had been building quietly in the background. The core issue was Iran's expanding missile program and its nuclear ambitions. Israel repeatedly warned that Iran was getting dangerously close to developing weapons that could threaten the entire region. Diplomatic talks between Washington and Tehran had already been struggling for months. Negotiations about nuclear restrictions and missile limits repeatedly collapsed. Then the rhetoric escalated. In a highly publicized speech, Donald Trump issued a direct warning to Iran. He accused the Iranian government of destabilizing the Middle East and supporting armed groups across the region. The message was clear: if Iran continued its military expansion, the United States and its allies would respond. At the time, many analysts believed it was political pressure, but within days, the situation moved from words to military action. In the early hours of February 28, 2026, a coordinated military operation began. Israel launched a major preemptive strike against Iran, an operation known as Operation Lion's Roar, while the U.S. unleashed its own overwhelming force, Operation Epic Fury. Israeli fighter jets and long-range missiles targeted multiple locations inside Iran. The primary targets included Iranian military command centers, ballistic missile launch facilities, intelligence headquarters, and Revolutionary Guard infrastructure. Explosions were reported in Tehran and several other major cities, but the most shocking moment came shortly after. During the operation, a targeted strike killed Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, along with several senior officials. This was effectively a decapitation strike against Iran's leadership. The attack immediately transformed a regional confrontation into a full-scale crisis. For Iran, this was no longer a political conflict. It was now a direct act of war. Iran responded almost immediately. Within hours, Iranian forces launched waves of ballistic missiles and drones toward Israel. Despite Israel's advanced missile defense systems, several missiles penetrated defenses. One of the deadliest strikes hit a residential neighborhood in Beit Shemesh, killing 9 civilians. Across the country, 19 people were killed, nearly 3,000 people were injured in the missile attacks. Air raid sirens sounded across Israel for days. Airspace over the country was temporarily shut down. But Iran didn't stop there. Instead of limiting retaliation to Israel alone, Iran launched missiles and drones targeting U.S. military bases and allied countries across the Gulf. Several countries were hit or targeted during these retaliatory strikes, including Bahrain, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and military sites connected to U.S. forces across the region. Many missiles were intercepted, but the message was unmistakable. Iran was willing to expand the war across multiple countries. Following Iran's retaliation, the United States formally joined the military campaign. American and Israeli forces began sustained airstrikes across Iran. Over the first week of the conflict, hundreds of military sites were reportedly destroyed. By early March, reports indicated that over 1,300 people in Iran had been killed during the air campaign. One of the most strategic attacks happened on March 13, 2026. The United States launched a massive bombing raid on Kharg Island, Iran's main oil export hub in the Persian Gulf. More than 90 military sites were destroyed in the attack. Kharg Island is critically important because it handles up to 90% of Iran's oil exports. However, U.S. forces deliberately avoided destroying the oil infrastructure itself. Instead, the message was strategic pressure. The United States warned that energy infrastructure could become a target if Iran continued blocking shipping routes. As the war intensified, Iran took one of the most consequential steps in global geopolitics. Iran moved to block the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is one of the most important shipping routes on Earth. Nearly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this strait. As the conflict disrupted shipping, hundreds of ships were stranded, global oil prices surged, energy markets began to panic. The conflict was no longer just a regional war. It was now affecting the global economy. As of mid-March 2026, the conflict has expanded beyond just Iran and Israel. Multiple fronts have emerged across the Middle East. Israel has launched additional operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon, while Iranian-aligned groups have launched attacks on U.S. and Israeli interests across the region. Meanwhile, the United States has already spent over $12 billion on military operations in the conflict. At least 13 U.S. military personnel have been killed so far. Despite international calls for a ceasefire, both sides appear unwilling to back down. On March 16, 2026, the war has entered its third week. Airstrikes continue across Iran. Missile attacks toward Israel have not completely stopped. Debris from an Iranian missile attack fell on the old city of Jerusalem, causing damage on the Temple Mount near the Al-Aqsa Mosque, at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and inside the Jewish quarter. Iran has signaled that it is not currently willing to negotiate unless the war ends entirely. At the same time, several major countries, including Germany, Japan, and Australia, have avoided joining the conflict militarily and are instead pushing for diplomatic solutions. But for now, the situation remains extremely unstable. A regional conflict involving multiple countries is already underway. And the biggest fear among global leaders is that this could still escalate into something even larger. On March 17, a missile launched from Iran with a cluster warhead hit a building in Ramat Gan and killed 2 residents in their 70s. Another missile targeted at the Jerusalem as part of the barrage was intercepted. A statement from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps called the death of the 2 civilians a revenge for the blood of martyr Dr. Ali Khamenei and his companions, who had been killed a day before as the target of an Israeli airstrike. On March 18th, in a series of Iranian cluster bomb attacks, a foreign worker from Thailand at Moshav Adhanom was killed by shrapnel from a missile, while a group of 3 women at a beauty salon in the West Bank village were killed when they were struck by debris from a cluster munition. A missile strike damaged 3 empty private planes parked at Ben Gurion Airport, leading Israeli authorities to reduce to 130 the maximum number of passengers permitted on outbound flights. While Israel intensified its air campaign inside Iran, multiple strikes were reported around Tehran in central Iran. Among those killed are Iran's Minister of Intelligence, Esmail Khatib. These were not random casualties. They were targeted removals of individuals responsible for coordinating Iran's military response. Just days after March 18th, the conflict took an even more dangerous turn. On March 21st, the United States launched a powerful strike on Iran's Natanz nuclear facility. The attack reportedly used bunker buster bombs, designed to penetrate deep underground structures. This marked a major escalation. For the first time in the war, a key nuclear site had been directly targeted. Iran responded immediately. Ballistic missiles were launched towards southern Israel, including the city of Dimona, home to Israel's own nuclear research facility. The message was unmistakable. This was no longer just a conventional war. The conflict was now entering the nuclear dimension. Dozens of people were injured in the strikes as both sides signaled they were willing to escalate further. As we move into the 4th week of this escalating conflict, the cycle of strikes and counterstrikes shows no sign of slowing down. On March 22nd, the United States and Israel kept up their intense air campaign inside Iran. They targeted more missile production and storage facilities, especially around Tehran. The goal was clear: to destroy Iran's ability to keep launching attacks. Hundreds of military sites had already been hit in previous weeks, and these new strikes added to the pressure. While Iranian forces fired waves of attacks not just at Israel, but across the Gulf. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE all came under fire. On March 25th alone, Iran launched dozens of drones and ballistic missiles. One drone even struck a fuel tank at Kuwait International Airport. Many were intercepted, but the message was unmistakable. Iran was determined to drag the entire region into the fight. Meanwhile, the economic pain kept growing. The Strait of Hormuz remained blocked. President Trump had given Iran a 48-hour deadline to reopen the vital shipping route or face strikes on its power plants. But on March 26th, he extended that deadline by another 10 days, saying talks were still ongoing. Global oil prices stayed high, and ships remained stranded. Then came a major escalation on March 27th. Israel launched precise strikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. The targets included the Shahid Kondab heavy water complex in Iraq and the Ardakan yellowcake plant in Yazd. Both are key facilities in Iran's nuclear program. Explosions were also reported near Isfahan. Israel said the strikes were necessary to prevent Iran from ever building a nuclear weapon. This was a direct response to Iran's refusal to back down and its continued missile attacks. Iran's retaliation was swift and deadly. The very same day, Iranian missiles and drones slammed into Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, a base used by both Saudi and American forces. At least 12 U.S. troops were wounded. This brought the total number of American service members wounded in the war to more than 300, with 13 already killed since February 28th. While in a new and worrying development, Yemen's Houthis, backed by Iran, officially entered the conflict. They announced they had fired ballistic missiles at Israel, opening yet another front. As of yesterday, March 28, 2026, the war has entered its fifth week. Airstrikes continue over Iran. Missile alerts still sound in Israel. Diplomatic efforts through Pakistan and other channels have not produced a breakthrough. Iran says it will only negotiate if the attacks stop completely. The United States and Israel say they will keep the pressure on until Iran agrees to dismantle its nuclear program and stop threatening the region. What started as political pressure quickly turned into direct military confrontation, a targeted strike, a leader assassinated, missile retaliation across the region, and a global energy crisis unfolding at the same time. The question is, how far it will go? The biggest fear now is that one more strike, one more retaliation could push this conflict into something even larger, with consequences felt around the world.